future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre and Lindh.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
And good afternoon, Anton Severin of the American Gaming Association. How are you doing today, my fellow Swede?
I'm doing great. Always great to be talking to a fellow Swede. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I can see in the background here, you're live from the U.S. state capital here, always close to the action, the American Gaming Association. So it's great to have you on here today, Anton. And obviously, you're the director of research here for the American Gaming Association. And I'm really curious today to kind of create a discussion together. What is the latest trend in American gaming, both online and land-based? What are the current priorities for the American Gaming Association, and just generally to understand where the industry is heading? So I wanted to just kind of kick off today, Anton, by asking you what are the current priorities for the American Gaming Association today?
Yeah, no, certainly. Great to be with you, Pierre. So there are a couple of issues that are kind of topping our agenda at the moment. I would almost say that what we talk about most at the moment is the need to really drive out the illegal markets, drive them out of business over here in the US. It's really the biggest threat to the industry, in particular the quickly expanding sports betting industry over here. As we've seen over the past few years in the wake of kind of the Supreme Court decision that opened the door to a legal expansion over here. Alongside the legal expansion, we've also unfortunately seen these bad actors taking advantage of the excitement and all the demand that's out there for sports betting. So it's always hard to kind of gauge the size of an illegal market, but we are seeing, for example, looking at search data, that searches for illegal sportsbook brands are up significantly. Last year, those searches grew about the same as searches for legal books. So we're really looking to states and lawmakers to strengthen the laws and regulations and close the loopholes that exist and that erode regulations and permit unnecessary consumer risks. So we're trying to see increased enforcement there at the federal and at the local level. In addition, leading on responsible gaming is always our highest priority and a business obligation that we continue to grow, especially now in tandem with the expansion of sports betting. As you know, the industry is very committed to making sure that we have a sustainable relationship with the customers, and I think that's really paid off over the last few years. We do a lot of research, a lot of polling here at the AGA, and among other things, we do an annual survey to gauge kind of Americans' attitudes towards gaming and towards the gaming industry, and we've seen there that people's belief that the industry is committed to responsible gaming has increased substantially in recent years. Like last year, it was up 40% compared to 2018. And we know that like 3 out of 4 past year gamblers are aware of at least one industry RG resource. So the industry has put a lot of time into it, and that's paying off. People are getting the message, and we continue to put it out there. AGA, we have a game plan, responsible gaming consumer education campaign where we partner with sports leagues and teams, but also operators to kind of educate consumers about some key strategies to sports bet responsibly, and that's certainly gearing up now with kind of like the peak in US sports betting coming up with the start of the football season in a little while, and then also September is coming up, which is Responsible Gaming Education Month. So look out for educational opportunities and activations from the AGA throughout the month of September.
Great, thank you for that, Anton. And you mentioned in the beginning here the illegal market and your efforts to curb the illegal market. It's an interesting point, and obviously on the European side, this is what many regulators are battling against as well, to find this middle ground between regulating the industry, keeping marketing at bay, but also understanding that you need to give the operators leeway in order to not make the illegal offer too attractive. Can you talk a little bit more to the size of the illegal gambling market? You mentioned here in search-wise that it's around 50-50 between kind of the illegal offering and the regulated offering. Do you have more indication of the channelization in the US market? And also, what is the strategy from AGA's perspective in order to just curb the illegal gambling market? Like, what do you think should be done in order to curb the illegal gambling market in the US?
Yeah, so it's inherent in the problem here, the difficulty in measuring how big is this problem really, and we can only kind of try and get to it through these secondary channels. So one thing is looking at search data, as we mentioned before, searches for illegal sports betting brands were up, I think, 38% last year, which is on par with searches for legal sites, 36, which was up 36% over the previous year. But we do see a big difference there between states that have legalized sports betting and states that haven't. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think illegal sites were on average. The illegal searches for illegal sites constituted between 60 and 70% on average there, compared to less than closer to 20% in legal states. So that's an indication, especially when it comes to states that haven't yet legalized, like how the magnitude of the challenge there. Then also we, a couple of years ago, we did a survey of sports bettors where we tried to get a sense of kind of the migration happening among bettors from illegal sites to legal ones with the legalization of the market. And what we saw there was that more than half of past year sports bettors at least partially bet with illegal unregulated sites. So we gave them a long list of various brands, and more than half of them selected the offshore ones, and we prompted them, told them like, okay, hey, were you aware that you are at least partially playing with using unregulated sites here? And the vast majority of them, I think it was closer to 80%, were surprised to learn that, and especially since about 3/4 of them are very eager to use only legal sites. So there were some other numbers in there that substantial share of them even thought that gambling with your corner bookie was legal. So there is there's still a big task there for us and for the industry as a whole to educate people, to help them find the legal avenues. But yeah, the magnitude of the problem is certainly substantial, but hard to gauge exactly how big.
Yeah, really interesting. So it seems to be an educational issue more than anything, that through education you would be able to presumably move people to the legal offering just by making them aware, essentially, that these sites are not regulated, and here's the regulated offering. That seems to be like the key takeaway from the research here.
Yeah, and not only education of consumers, right? Like if consumers don't have an avenue to bet on sports legally in their site, then what are the options? Maybe in some cases they can cross into neighboring states and place their bets there. But if they're far away from a state border or in a part of the country that hasn't gotten that far, like they don't have any legal opportunities. So in addition to educating consumers, we also have to educate the policymakers and decision makers to raise awareness about this problem, right? And both help them create an environment that might allow consumers to bet legally, but also to root out the bad actors.
Right. So take the state of New York, for example, which a high-profile state that legalized earlier in the year, and obviously bordering New Jersey, bordering Pennsylvania, and there was a lot of crossover between these the consumers who went over state lines in order to play legally, and at the same time, obviously, there would be a portion of these consumers who would play on the unregulated offshore offering. Do you have any insights on how the player behavior changed after the regulation came into effect, in terms of new players, in terms of players who used to play across state lines who now played in New York, and also in terms of players who moved from the illegal offering into the legal offering? I don't know if you can give more nuance there.
Yeah, so New York is still a very green market. It's only been operational for a little bit over half a year, so we don't yet have any hard data points on that kind of migration. But certainly. For you mentioned the kind of crossover that's kind of been assumed and alluded to in some places, like how many people are crossing state borders. It has been suggested that about 20% of all betting activity in New Jersey was coming from New York residents who were crossing over, placing their bets, and then going back home to New York City again. So if the New York market was truly, competitive, having created a structure that could, offer as competitive a product as possible, that could, compete, like not only with the New Jersey offerings and in other neighboring states, but also more importantly could compete with the illegal offshore offerings, then we would perhaps seen other trends in the data than we are seeing. So, for example, New Jersey has come pretty far in terms of maturity. So we could have expected a kind of drop off in betting activity in New Jersey. However, that is not what's showing up in the data. Like, in fact, in the first half year of 2022, betting handle in New Jersey is actually up almost 20% compared to the perhaps 20% you could have expected disappearing if New York was truly competitive. Similar thing in Pennsylvania, in the other end of New York, bordering Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania as well is up by similar figures, nearly 20% year over year in betting handle. So there's still certainly challenges that remain there to create a fully competitive market.
Yeah. Interesting, Anton. Thank you for that. I want to jump over to the second point that you mentioned of the priorities within the American Gaming Association, which was the responsible gambling. We started this podcast by greeting each other as fellow Swedish here, and so we will probably both know and remember in the early 2000s in Sweden. In the early 2010s in Sweden. Very aggressive marketing from the operators led eventually to a backlash from the public, who kind of crucified the industry in the late 2010s. That then led to kind of the overregulation, you could argue, in in Sweden, and the market is what it is today. In the US so far, and I'm just kind of speaking my own personal kind of subjective opinion here, there seems to be almost an identical re-emergence of this aggressive marketing push in order to sign up as many players as possible from the operators without perhaps too much focus on responsible gambling. Are you worried that this could potentially give a backlash to the industry on the online front in the long run in the United States, or do you have a different perspective on this question, perhaps?
Yeah, but I don't know if I would characterize it as, RG taking a back foot to the advertising. In some regards they kind of go hand in hand, right? So I mentioned have a game plan, public education campaign that we're running. We're partnering with entities like the large New York sports teams like the Knicks, the Rangers. Here in Washington, we partnered with the Capitals, which is next door to where we are sitting, and together we are, as we're seeing this rollout of sports betting, consumers are being made aware of these offerings through all sorts of advertising, certainly, but in tandem with that, we also strongly stress the need to engage with this new activity in a responsible way. And as it relates to advertising more broadly, look, we're still in the very early stages of the rollout of sports betting, and even earlier when it comes to iGaming over here. Europe, Sweden has kind of seen this transformation of the market over 2 decades period. Like, it was only in 2018 where the first legal sports betting offerings outside of Nevada appeared. So there is certainly some expectation that the current levels of advertising that you see in certain places will kind of subsume as this initial rush to attract consumer subsides. And we talked about New York before. Like, there's already some early signs there with I think it was BetMGM that some months back announced that they were pulling back on their investment in advertising there. So I think it's too early still to kind of draw strict parallels to what's happening over here towards what's happened in Sweden or in other European markets, but time will tell.
Yeah, fair enough, Anton. Another, just changing the topic a bit, on the European side of the industry, traditionally it's been very difficult for the operators to unite towards common purposes. On the European side, we don't really have great representation within the industry. We don't really have really strong industry organizations. We have obviously great organizations like the EGBA that is representing a couple of the major players here on the European side. But other than that, there are mostly local industry organizations. Sweden has 2, Finland has 1, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, the UK, and so on. But it seems to be difficult for the industry to unite on the European side. In contrast to that, obviously, the American Gaming Association has done an incredible job over the last couple of decades in order to unite the operators towards common goals that you then represent and you then lobby for. But it must be difficult to align all the members towards common goals. You have a quite diverse membership base from different players who want perhaps different things. Can you talk about the challenges of getting everyone on the same page within the industry, and how do you go about the priorities that you set in the organization? For example, sorry to finish the point. The move from being focused only on land-based to also include the digital part of the industry was a big shift, right? A strategic shift within the American Gaming Association. How do you get all the players on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think having different opinions on certain issues is kind of inherent to any trade association, regardless of what industry you're in, and like all other trade associations, we try to focus on complex set of issues that individual member companies can't act on alone necessarily, and that requires consensus and coalition building. And any association's positions gonna reflect compromises of the assorted views of the membership, but we certainly work with our boards and our various committees to try and find and define what should be the AGA priorities and agenda going forward. And key is finding those places where we can find common ground and where we can push the industry forward, and while at the same time like stepping to the side where members have competing interests, basically. When it comes to this change in the membership, I mean, our membership reflects really the diverse makeup of the US gaming industry. So whether that's online, retail, suppliers, operators, or we have commercial and tribal operators, which is a dynamic that's not present in Europe at all, right? So with that change, like, it doesn't mean that one group is dominating another. Like, not surprisingly, like, our membership and their priorities have evolved over time to kind of reflect what's going on in the industry. So yeah, certainly, like, currently we're at the point where many gaming companies are moving increasingly more towards an omni-channel approach, and when it comes to their interactions with their consumers, certainly a lot of that was driven by COVID, which really kind of took that to the next level and really upended like how people work and are entertained and play. And so that created new baselines for a lot of industries, like including ours. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our traditional, brick and mortar casinos, which kind of AGA started out representing, playing a smaller role. Like, they are still, very much a core of our industry. If you look at revenue, like those revenue from those physical locations still account for like more than 80% of all revenue. But I mean, like, there's a lot of excitement on that side as well about this kind of transformation and the opportunities that digitalization means when it comes to consumer interactions. Like, people can't be at the casino all the time, and now there's a way to engage with their consumers, whether they're at home or commuting to work or at a sports arena or any other setting, really. So it's really like, these kind of changes, like and factors, they really complement each other, and so I think going forward, there's certainly room for every sort of vertical within the work that we do.
Great, Anton. I think you mentioned that around 80% of the total gambling market right now in the US is derived from land-based, essentially. So about 20% is online currently. Did I understand it correctly? Yeah. So exactly. Could you talk to a little bit on the latest numbers on that front as well? Like, how is the commercial gambling revenues currently evolving? I saw on your website that you just released kind of the Q2 numbers, or at least from May, I think you reported from at the moment.
Yeah, from Q2. That's correct.
Yeah, can you give a little bit of a breakdown on how the gambling revenues are currently?
Yeah, no, certainly. So yeah, it's timely recording that we're doing today, because we just kind of wrapped up the season of regulators reporting their June revenue numbers. So with that, we now have a full picture of what Q2 looked like. And so what the picture that is emerging is that after a record-setting 2021, commercial gaming, which is what we have most current numbers from, has really carried that momentum into the current year. So Q2 was the best ever start the industry has ever had, and now Q2 was actually the highest grossing quarter ever that the industry has had. So between traditional casino gaming, sports betting, and iGaming, the industry generated $14.8 billion in Q2, which is up almost 9% year over year, and up about 3% from the previously best quarter, which was set in Q4 of last year. And looking at the first half of 2022 as a whole, we now stand at more than $29 billion. So that's tracking about 18% ahead where we were this time last year, which, remember, was at that point the best year ever. So the industry is certainly doing well. Like, even as we're coming up towards these tougher comparisons, like at this point last year, the industry was really firing on all cylinders, and basically all COVID era restrictions had been lifted. So the thought has certainly been that as we get into these tougher comps, like the rate of growth will unsurprisingly kind of level out, and we'll reach a more stable point. And we do see that in the month over month numbers. So like the year over year growths within Q2 slowed from I think it was 13% in April to about 11% in May to about 3% in June. So we are seeing that kind of slow down, but that's really is reflective of the strength that we had last year, particularly the kind of from March last year, but also on the kind of normalization, stabilization that we're seeing in the market. So really unprecedented growth that we're seeing over here.
That's great. And if you would break it down, like, what is driving this growth? Is it online? Is it land-based? Is it both?
Yeah, so that's the really exciting part about this. Like, you hear a lot of talk about sports betting all the time, but in fact, land-based gaming, so slots and table games at physical commercial casinos, also had their best ever quarter in Q2, right. Which was up a substantial amount from last year as well. Similarly, iGaming had a very strong quarter, came in at about 1.2 billion. Sports betting generated about 1.4 billion in Q2, which is a little bit slower than the last few quarters, but that's also very expected as the summer and the months of Q2 usually have the slowest sports calendar over here. So that's in line with the seasonal trends that we usually see.
There is this speculation in the industry. As long as I've been in this industry, since like 2004 or something like that, there's always been this speculation: is the iGaming industry recession-proof? And especially talking about the digital part of the industry. Obviously, 2008 was not a great year for Vegas and the land-based casinos, but have you, what's your thoughts here, Anton? Have you seen any indications how the industry will fare? Obviously, the economic times are not the best right now. Inflation is rampant. We are facing a potential stagflation, although the inflation numbers that was released in the US the other day looked positive, if you can call whatever 8.8% inflation positive, but right. The markets reacted well. What's your thoughts here? Like, how will the industry fare, do you think, in these kind of uncertain times? Because so far it seems like all the indications are that the industry is doing great despite the economic downturn.
Yeah. No, certainly that's kind of what we're seeing so far. And we certainly face the same macroeconomic challenges that is a burden on other industries. Whether that's supply chains and labor shortages, like that. That's always in the background. And but when it comes to pure performance in terms of what revenue we're generating, we haven't really seen a substantial slowdown as of yet, as of the time of recording. And I mean, like, historically, the industry has been fairly inflation proof, certainly, like not really seeing much of an effect from swings in gas price, for example. But we've never seen this, or we haven't seen this level of inflation, for example, for 4 decades. So we've seen some recent interviews with some of our CEOs that they have reported like little in terms of change in consumer behavior due to these macroeconomic factors, but they are certainly keeping an eye on what the future impact might be. We also we're at the tail end of the Q2 earnings reporting season, and they certainly indicate that, look at Vegas, for example. You mentioned that Vegas was certainly suffered from in 2008 and 9, but Vegas is as strong as ever. And the expectation seems to be that that's going to continue into the fall as we're seeing more group returns, and international travel hasn't really picked up yet, and Vegas or Nevada as a whole had its highest grossing quarter as well, like in Q2. And also, if you look at regional markets, most regional casinos are also reporting impressive numbers for Q2. It's certainly things that we're tracking, and here at AGA, we a year ago we started something we're calling the Gaming Outlook Index, where we're looking at a number of factors kind of shaping future expectations. The kind of most interesting part of that is that we conduct a survey with our member CEOs to kind of get a sense of where they see the industry and their companies going over the next quarter or two. So we last did this or released this back in April. The sentiments that they expressed there was that the industry was certainly in a very good place, but that they were expecting somewhat of a slowdown. That's also panned out very close to those predictions. We will be coming out with a new outlook here in October, so certainly stay tuned for that, and to get a sense what the industry thinks is going to happen towards the latter half of this year.
Brilliant, Anton. Exciting to hear the industry is doing well so far, and I think once and for all we'll get a good indication here during these times how the industry will fare during this kind of uncertain times. I want to move over kind of the last point of today, which is looking at the state level and regulation. And as a starting point here, there's been a lot of excitement since the start of the pandemic, let's say, of newly regulated states. And we've seen so far, obviously, from an online sports betting perspective, a positive movement within regulation where 30-something states are regulated, and many operators are active in those markets. However, on the iGaming side of things, only like 6 states are currently regulated on online gambling, on iGaming side. So first of all, I would like to ask, did you guys expect this slow rollout of iGaming specifically on state level? And then secondly as well, what's your expectation on current states that have not yet become regulated as we move forward?
Yes. So when it comes to iGaming, as you said, there are certainly or currently 6 states that allow for full online casino gaming. Additionally, a 7th, Nevada, allow only online poker rights, but they don't really break that out in their reporting. So for all intents and purposes, we're counting 6 states. So I think when looking at the kind of the legislative momentum, like it's important to look at what are what sort of stakeholders are involved in these different processes, right? So when you look at sports betting, what has happened there, you see at this point certainly that there is a very large ecosystem of stakeholders that are backing the legalization of sports betting in a lot of states. So not only do you have like the traditional casino industry that sees sports betting as additional way to engage with their consumers, as we talked about before. But you also have sports leagues and teams locally in different states that see the benefits. In certain states, you even see sports books directly, next door to certain arenas. You also have media companies getting involved, seeing sports betting as a way to increase the value of their broadcasts, but in some cases even partnering with operators to develop their own branded sports books. Like you have Fox Bets, for example, like Sports Illustrated, likewise, and we have some other entities that are kind of looking at getting involved more, like ESPN and even Disney. So there's a big ecosystem with an interest there. You don't really see that to the same extent when it comes to iGaming. That sort of alliance coming in. You certainly, we have kind of seen in some cases that there are more concerns around RG when tied to iGaming that we don't necessarily we see when it comes to other verticals, even though, as we know, like iGaming enables you to kind of track behavior, spending, time gaming in a way that can really be leveraged to kind of safeguard responsible play. But yeah, I think that's, you can find like a lot of the background to why we're seeing this kind of mismatch in pace. But I mean, like, having said that, like, sports betting is certainly has a high profile, but as we know, like iGaming has a much higher margin. So like in the first half of this year, like iGaming generated $2.4 billion. So that's, as we said, only between 6 different states. Meanwhile, sports betting grossed just over $3 billion, so just 0.6 billion more. But that's spread over 26 states that have commercial sports betting and that report that. So iGaming has much a bigger potential growth. It's a much bigger potential growth area for the industry, but it's tougher to roll out. But probably in the long term, iGaming will has huge potential.
Interesting. And what's your expectation now going forward, Anton, even from a sports betting perspective? Are there any states that are currently close to regulating? What's your expectations here in the next, say, 1 to 3 years?
Yeah. So yeah, starting with iGaming again, like we didn't really see any momentum this round of state sessions. There were 7 states that considered some form of iGaming legalization, and none of them really made much headway. I mean, we've seen some moves in recent years, like Connecticut was the one state that legalized it last year, and the year before in 2020, Michigan did the same. So we don't really make predictions about how many states will legalize by what state. There are several other entities that do that. But when it comes to sports betting, I mean, we're at a point now where, as you mentioned, like more than 30 states have legalized it. And actually, just yesterday, at the time of recording here, Governor Baker in Massachusetts signed the legislation up there. So with that, we're at 36 states plus the District of Columbia that have legalized sports betting in some form. And with that, about nearly 2/3 of all American adults now live in a state where they can bet legally in their home jurisdiction. So with that, there is fewer states remaining with potential to legalize. We had 3 states this year that did it, with including Massachusetts. We had Maine and Kansas, and Ohio was kind of at the tail end of last year. So we're still waiting for all of them to kind of get up and running, maybe towards the end of this year, maybe into 2023. and we still have one motion still on the in play at the end of this year, with California looking to allow their voters to decide the future of sports betting in that state. Again, trying to predict what the remaining states will do is I'll leave to others. But we've certainly come a very long way in a very short amount of time, and it's very exciting that sports bettors around the country now have opportunities to bet safely that they didn't 5 years ago.
Brilliant, Anton. And so my sister and her family lives in California, so I'm going to be there during the fall to check out live the referendum that is taking place there in November. Of course, it will be interesting to see the turnout for that. But brilliant. Thank you so much, Anton, for sharing your time with me here today and give some insights and updates on the current priorities and updates from the American Gaming Association. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I hope to have you on soon again.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.